Before this story begins, let me warn you, imagine every detail, breathe in every word. The more you immerse yourself, the harder you listen, the deeper the fear seeps into your thoughts. Enjoy the terror. The story begins in the house where my grandparents lived and still live to this day. It was sometime in the 80s. My grandmother was waiting for my grandfather to come home for lunch, and the children were at school. Someone entered the hallway. She thought it was my grandfather, so she went into the hallway, but there was no one there. Rustling sounds could be heard from the bathhouse. The house was well maintained and large, and in the hallway there was a door with frosted glass leading to the bathhouse. My grandmother approached the door and called for my grandfather, confused as to why he was there. Was he planning to heat the bath? She tried to open the door, but it was locked from the inside. Through the glass she could see a shadow moving around. She called again, and the shadow stopped. My grandmother thought my grandfather might have gotten sick since he wasn't responding. She looked through the crack under the door and saw 2 bare, hairy, dirty men's feet. Terrified, she thought it might be a burglar or a maniac. She locked the door from the outside and ran into the yard to wait for my grandfather. She didn't have to wait long. He soon arrived from work, and she told him everything. Together they went to the bathhouse. When my grandfather pulled at the door to the wood storage, it suddenly slammed shut with a loud bang, as if someone on the other side had forced it closed. My grandmother screamed, and my grandfather immediately grabbed the handle, trying to open it, but it was stuck, as if jammed. At that moment, they both heard a whisper. It came from somewhere behind the wall, weak and barely audible, as if someone was standing very close, whispering. My grandfather froze, listening, while my grandmother felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The whisper continued, quiet, as though someone was trying to say something, but the words were lost in the indistinct noise. Her breathing became shallow. She tried to catch a single word, but it was in vain. Suddenly, the whisper changed. It became sharper, more aggressive, as if the speaker was losing patience. Now, the voice sounded angrier, but still not loud, as if the person behind the wall was struggling not to scream, but their fury could be felt in every sound. The bathhouse walls seemed thin, as if the entity was about to break through. Each whisper reverberated in the air, and my grandmother felt her hands grow cold. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, her eyes fixed on the wall. Suddenly, the voice became even more furious, sharper, as if the owner was in despair, but still just as menacing and quiet. My grandmother clenched her hands until it hurt, feeling the cold seeping into her bones. My grandfather heard it too, but his face remained focused. He took a step forward, trying to figure out what this whisper was, but as soon as he got closer to the wall, the voice abruptly stopped. At that moment, the silence seemed even more oppressive and ominous, as if whatever was behind the wall was lying in wait, biding its time. When the voice stopped, an eerie stillness filled the bathhouse. Shaken by what had happened, my grandparents stepped outside into the fresh air. They decided not to dwell on the incident and spent the rest of the day occupied with their usual tasks. Although no more rustling or voices were heard after that, the memory of that event lingered in their minds. Every evening my grandmother would glance toward the bathhouse, feeling a sense of unease, but she never dared to go back inside. My grandfather reinforced the doors and cleared out the clutter, but neither he nor my grandmother ever entered the bathhouse after dark. Their lives slowly returned to normal, but they both knew there were mysteries in the world better left unsolved.